Welcome to Broadcast Map, the show that covers the world of broadcasting, the Canadian media landscape, sports media, the show's favorite sports teams, as well as news and politics. Here's your host, Ali Musa.
Thank you, Rod Mahood, for the intro. On Tuesday, April the 1st, 2025, April Fool's Day. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am joined by Dave Sturgeon, the founder of Giant Rock Media and Radio TV Agents. Dave, I really want to take this opportunity to thank you so much for joining me to talk all about these two companies today.
Well, thanks for having me, Ali. Good to talk to you again. And I just realized that it's April 1st. So, yeah, I'll try and keep everything as, not foolish as possible.
Oh, it all works, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
So let's start with what is Giant Rock Media?
Right. Well, I had, just to give you a little background, I had moved from Canada to the U.S. and was managing radio stations in the U.S. when I moved over to the agency side to run an agency in 2014. And then in 2020, launched my own agency, Radio TV Agents, which is an ad agency that is still my primary source of income. It's an ad agency that provides radio, TV, digital, social advertising solutions to real estate agents and real estate investors specifically. Well, over the course of the last 5 years, I've been spending more and more time consulting radio stations and helping them to optimize their local endorsement, revenue generating, how to coaching the talent on how to deliver those endorsements, coaching the management on how to optimize the inventory, and coaching the talent on how to deliver engaging, compelling, and effective live radio endorsements. And the reason that I was able to do that, and I'm able to coach stations on how to do that, is because for 10 years, that's what I've sold to radio stations on behalf of clients, right? So the clients of Radio TV Agents, my agency, I go to radio stations in 300 plus markets across the US and Canada, negotiate deals with those stations and with a prime on-air talent to actually endorse or provide an inferred endorsement for that real estate agent or team. And in the process of doing that over the course of 10 years, it's become an expertise of mine, and I'm able to help stations. Because a lot of small market and medium market stations aren't optimizing that part of radio, that premium advertising asset, which is to leverage the power of the connection their morning talent or their afternoon talent has with listeners on behalf of one real estate agent, or it could be any service provider. It could be HVAC. It could be, a plumber. Could be a dentist. Could be any one of about 20 categories that really make sense in the local radio endorsement world. And so stations go out, they sell their ads, sell 30, 60-second ads, but they're not really, in many cases, optimizing that premium, because you can sell it for more money and the talent makes a talent fee, and it works better for the advertiser. So it's a win-win-win. But for some reason, it hasn't been a major priority in terms of a profit center for a lot of station managers, market managers. And so I've helped them to do that, to unleash the revenue that's sitting out there that they aren't realizing if they aren't doing live endorsements.
Could the same be said then for many of the stations then in for many of the bigger stations, specific like in Canada? Because now the reason I'm asking you this, because you have experience in both markets. Whereas, do you feel, based on what you know, like the stations in Canada by the conglomerates,
Mm-hmm.
are they? Do you find a little bit? Is their way of advertising maybe a little bit more streamlined than some of the smaller market stations would be?
So if you go back, I got very heavily involved in selling radio as an agency guy, selling radio to real estate agents and teams, primarily in the U.S. And in the U.S. forever, uh, the live local radio endorsement revenue model has been very strong. Um, Definitely huge in it's a primary moneymaker in the major markets: LA, New York, San Francisco, Houston, Dallas, those top 10 markets. And then also very strong across the large markets, medium markets. Many of the smaller markets, um, there's room for improvement. That's in the US. In Canada, up to 10 years ago, when I started calling stations in Canada on behalf of Canadian agents, real estate agents, many of those stations in Canada at the time were saying, "Well, we don't do that. How do you do it? We just haven't done that. You know, we can't give you a live first and break 60-second endorsement by the client or by the talent. I mean, talent's never used the services of that real estate agent." I said, "Okay, it's actually an inferred endorsement because there's very little likelihood that the morning or afternoon talent or midday talent has used the services of that agent, but we can frame it in a way where they're saying, if I needed to sell my home, the only agent I would hire is so and so, and it's here's why," and they walk through the value proposition. So it was very hard to get that going in Canada. If you remember, there might have been one or two live endorsements, and they were probably recorded to sound live on the Toronto talk stations for a men's clothing place, but there weren't a lot of just one full on first and break 60-second endorsements for a product or service locally by the local talent. So what happened was a good friend of mine who I worked with in radio in New Liskeard, Ontario, a million years ago, Bill Carroll, who's now he does mornings at CFRA in Ottawa. At the time, I was here in California, and Bill was doing mornings on KFI or middays on KFI in Los Angeles. And at the same time, he was doing an afternoon show in Toronto, I think on AM 640. But
I remember that, actually.
right, so Bill was on the radio in LA, and I had him endorsing a client of mine in LA. And of course, Bill and I go back forever. So I had a client in Toronto who I was trying to get a live endorsement done for on 640, and there had been some hesitation to do that. But turns out that the news director at the time I had worked with in London when I had mornings on CJBK, Gord Harris, and of course Gord was the program director for Bill, who is doing his afternoon show in Toronto remotely from LA. And of course Bill could help me then with making Gord warm up to the idea of Bill doing live endorsements on his afternoon show for a Toronto client. Hopefully you're holding on to the rope and that all makes sense. Well, that's Chorus, right? So
Yeah.
Gord liked it, and it was fantastic. And we started doing live endorsements with Bill in Toronto on 640. And once we were doing it in Toronto with Chorus, then when I would go into other markets like Calgary or Edmonton or wherever else we were bringing a client on, I could say, "Hey, we're doing it in Toronto, and here's how it sounds." And because Chorus program directors, news directors, and sales managers network and talk all the time, they were able to see that, oh, this is a really viable revenue driver that provides a premium revenue income for the station that we're not realizing. And anyway, one thing led to another, and eventually, from that, all of the major companies in Canada um, have a directive and a profit center. I don't know if it's on the budgets of sales managers, but there is a directive to the sales teams to sell live endorsements. That would be Rogers does it, um, Chorus, Bell, Stingray for sure, and probably the room for improvement in Canada. Long answer to your question, but
No, no, no. I know. I like this. I like this.
yeah, the areas for growth in Canada would probably be the smaller markets and some of the independent and family-owned operations, where I think there's just kind of an inherent understanding that, okay, we hire these people to do shows, they do radio shows. After they're done their show, they go into the studio and they record commercials, and the sales team goes out and they sell advertising. But the dots are not always connected, that there's an opportunity for those personalities to actually deliver a live endorsement. In the process, that elevates their celebrity a bit, right? Gives them a little bit of authority in the community because they're endorsing a local service. But it generates revenue for them, a talent fee, and it generates a premium revenue for the client or for the station, who can charge more for a 60-second live endorsement that runs first in break before the show goes to the recorded stop set. So there is room for growth. I would say it's more in those smaller markets and with the independent companies as it would be, because there are directives out there to answer your question, um, on in terms of the corporate radio operators in Canada. They're doing it or trying to do it. Yeah.
But I think those see like what you are seeing though overall in Canada, like you're seeing a little bit more now in Canada. You are seeing some smaller, like some smaller people, some like smaller owners coming back in and taking over some stations that are being that the conglomerates are selling. Like Bell sold off quite a number.
Right. Right. Yeah, and that there are two categories of operators right now. There are buyers and there are sellers.
Yeah.
And you're going to see a lot more of that here stateside in the next 11, 12 months as deregulation goes into place. Because the deregulation, if everything goes according to what the lobbies are looking for, the radio lobbies, would allow one company to own all of the radio stations in the market. Now, that would not be the case in major markets and many of the large markets, maybe top 50. But after that, when you get into the medium and smaller markets, the hopes of these lobbies for deregulation in the radio world down here would be that one operator could own all the radio stations in a market. And in that world, you will have buyers and you will have sellers. And there will also be a third category of swappers. You will likely have the larger corporations swapping stations with maybe a smaller independent owner in this market, and say, okay, you can have Memphis and we want Nashville, and those kind of things will start to happen. But for sure, it seems to be where we are now in the current economy, um, and radio culture. It appears that the sellers are corporate and the buyers are the smaller independent owned operators who are able to focus more locally on providing a radio service as it should be, right? Live, local, relevant, focused on developing talent and having radio stations where it's as important to listen for what the person on the radio has to say as it is to the music they play. And that's harder to do and more expensive to do on a broad scale in Canada for corporate operators than it is for local operators. The My Broadcasting Corporation and My Broadcasting MBC and then MBS, Maritime Broadcasters. White Oaks, those smaller companies, that's their world, that's their bread and butter, right? And so they realize that they need to re-educate the community, that is listeners and advertisers, as to the power of radio, its ability to do things digital can't, its ability to produce entertainment that's interesting to the to local citizens of that community and so on, and produce real results for local advertisers. They can get granular, they can be very focused and hands-on on a local level, which is harder for those corporate entities to do.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you there, but I mean, but certainly, but is there a like how can though? I guess the larger question here is based just off the point that you just made. How can the advertising side, when it comes to like these local sort of advertiser pieces, how can they incorporate digital into it? Because you mentioned that there are some things that digital can't do, but obviously to kind of expand the brand, there has to be some form of digital that they have to do. There has to be some type of online advertising and marketing as well.
Sure. So, great question. And I think to back out of that just for a bit, we need to look at why radio is struggling.
Go ahead. Let's talk about that. Go ahead.
Yeah. Um, there are obviously a few reasons there. um, the uncertainty in the economy right now is like never before, and a lot of advertisers or people who'd like to advertise are circling the wagons and not spending the money, and so everybody's hurting: radio, TV, cable, digital, social. That's probably the primary reason why radio is struggling financially. But second to that, and maybe even more important, are those seven dreaded words that salespeople hear when they go out to meet a client. Is anyone even listening to radio anymore? And so radio's biggest problem is perception, because perception is not reality, right? Perception is not reality. Perception is anybody listening to radio anymore. Absolutely. 93% of Canadians and Americans listen to radio every week for up to 90 minutes a day. It's as relevant as ever. But digital has done a really good job, and social has done a better job of getting the attention of ad agencies and advertisers. It's newer, that incoming generation of IT and social minded marketers. That's what they sell. They may just listen to podcasts, right? Those people who are on the leading edge of negotiating media, selling ad time in the digital space have come up through that. They're listening to podcasts, they're watching CTV, smart TV. They may not be as connected to broadcast, but that doesn't mean it doesn't work. It doesn't mean it isn't still very, very relevant and popular. But they're at the leading edge of the world that sort of runs advertising and what people buy, what people believe works. People being advertisers, clients, business, small businesses across the US and Canada. So, just by virtue of volume of people out there who believe in digital and social versus the number of people who are out there on the streets selling and promoting radio, there's been this tidal wave of um, just industry promotion associated with digital and social. It's part of our everyday lives. Everybody's on some kind of social platform, and so they kind of think, well, I guess that's where everybody is. What's interesting, and I think this is why I'm able to help stations when I go in and help the market, right from the market manager to the GSM to the programming people to the salespeople, to help reignite their passion for radio. Part of the reason I'm able to do that is not just because I'm looking at numbers from the Radio Ad Bureau as to how many people are currently listening to radio, which is highly encouraging. It's because on the agency side, I have been selling radio, TV, cable TV, OTT and CTV. smart TV advertising, podcasts and online audio, SEM, SEO, all of it, pay per click. As an agency, we have to provide all of that. But here's the thing. I also, when I have my monthly meetings with our clients and we go over results, we look at their tracking sheets, where the calls are coming from, where the web forms are, the filled forms are coming from, where the web traction is coming from, where the new visits are coming from, all that. Which medium do you think is the 900-pound gorilla that does the best job out of all of those?
I actually feel that that either websites or social media do a better job.
So you see, there's the thing, right? You're a radio lover, and that's your answer. And the fact is, without any argument, and this is research that I'm involved in every day because I'm selling all of those products to advertisers with a view to getting their phone to ring, and building their revenue. Radio is by far the most powerful source of business, trackable business for all of my clients, every one of them. In many cases, nothing else works without radio as the foundational top of funnel influencer in the marketing mix. Right?
Yep.
So that's not, I'm not just saying that because I've been in radio since I was 16 and because I love it and want to defend it. It's because it's the truth. And so when I have annual masterminds with my clients and we're in a room and there's 160, 170 people in that room, all advertisers, and we're on stage and talking to them and doing question and answer. What I'm hearing most is, are there any more stations in my market that I can buy? Not what about this newfangled thing, or what about this new shiny object? These are guys who have learned that the strongest return on investment, guys and ladies, the strongest return on their marketing investment has been and continues to be radio. And so that's an interesting perspective, right? A lot of times radio people, they're selling radio, they're selling digital locally. They don't have that broad continental picture to look at. Like, I can look at 350 markets and tell you very clearly, here's what's happening. Here's where the results are coming from. And you should be very happy and you should be ecstatic and you should be out there on the street with your sellers, helping people realize that radio, when it's done right, is going to produce the best result. Now, not to say all those other things don't work, but my experience has been, and many agency owners, their experience has been as well, is that none of them work as well without radio as the foundational piece. They're good layers. And if you want, I can go into explaining why that is. I think people kind of are surprised as now. Why would that be the case?
Go ahead, actually. Yeah, no, let's hear it. Go ahead.
Well, see, one of the things that digital relies on to persuade an advertiser to buy OTT or podcast advertising is that it's very targetable, right? It's very targetable. You can use demographic targeting, you can use geographical targeting, you can get very granular. I mean, there are 3,500 data points that you can use to target a consumer. And so it sounds like when you hear that, you think, oh my goodness, that's going to be very, very effective. It's going to be extremely effective for my ad dollars to be, super targeted on the kind of consumer that I want to attract, as opposed to radio's broadcast approach, which is far more, you'd probably think it's more like, it's kind of like a shotgun approach, right? You can't target how old the person is listening, or if I'm a real estate agent and I want to attract sellers, people who are currently in the market to sell their home, and I buy radio, there's probably a lot of the people out there listening for whom that message isn't relevant. They might rent. They might not own a home. They might have just purchased their home. They're not thinking of selling their home. Whereas if I can actually using digital technology, target a homeowner who is in the market to sell, who lives in this specific geographical area. My goodness, that's going to work like a charm, right? Sounds like it would be great.
Yeah.
So people dig it, they love it, even though the cost per thousand, right, the CPM, is so much higher with OTT, CTV, podcasts. Like OTT is probably $60 retail for CPM. Podcast and online audio are probably 30 to $40 a CPM cost per thousand. Radio is probably down in the $5 to $8. So when I'm selling to, if I'm a radio person selling to an agency, that agency says to me, yeah, well, radio can't be very effective. Look how cheap it is. Why is it so cheap? Well, here's the answer to why it's so cheap and why it works better. Right? And it's because of the form of delivery and the cost of delivery. When radio airs a message, that message is heard by thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of people at one time. So it's one message to hundreds of thousands of people at one time. That's how it's delivered, right? That's how radio is delivered. OTT, CTV, smart TV advertising, podcast, digital advertising is one-to-one. So it is highly trackable and it is highly targetable. It's one message delivered to one person 1,000 times. Okay?
Yeah.
It's more expensive to do that than it is to do it with a broadcast tower, the way radio does it. And because of the way radio broadcasts and the incredible genius behind what radio is, when that message goes out, it's not just reaching the kind of clients and customers that you want to attract, because we know it is, right? That's not the only people it's reaching. It is going out there. It's like crowd delivery. You're delivering your message to a huge crowd of people. Whereas with the digital, you're delivering one message to one person at a time. The difference with that is really what social marketing and social networking is all about. So when that end consumer listening to the radio, the target you want, the consumer that you want, when that consumer hears the message, it's also being heard by their friends, their relatives, the people in their circle who are also listening to radio at the same time. And all of those people have an influence on the buying habits of the consumer you're targeting. So radio is like the original social network when it comes to the way the advertising works. One message delivered to a million versus one message delivered to one individual person. But when you take away that social component, it turns out that although it's highly targetable, you're not able to get the same frequency for the same amount of money, or for, in this case with radio, a lot less money. You're not able to get the frequency that creates a stickiness. And a person needs to hear that message a lot of times for them to actually act on it. Right?
Yeah.
And the mob mentality, positive mob mentality and crowd delivery and the buzz that goes with that community buzz that goes with the message delivered on radio just isn't there when you deliver a message one-on-one with digital or social. Now, on social, of course, you can create an ad that's really funny and it becomes viral and it goes on and it can do all kinds of great things for you. And listen, the digital, I sell OTT every day. I sell CTV every day. I just make sure that my clients have radio as the foundation. And then if they have the money, OTT or these digital assets can be a very powerful layer on top of what they're doing foundationally. But hopefully that helps explain a little bit why it's much more affordable and much more effective in terms of producing a direct response, which would be a consumer calling, saying, come and see me, or, buying the product that it is you're selling. And there's all kinds of other evidence that I can provide, but I don't want to, I've already gone too deep into the weeds.
No problem. No, this has been a fascinating conversation. Actually, this has been a very fascinating conversation, and they can find you at radiotvagents.com.
You bet. Yep. Dave at radiotvagents.com. Anybody has questions about radio or TV, or needs help, or is a radio manager or sales manager who'd like some help re-engaging the passion in the sales force and helping with wording and how to have those conversations with advertisers and agencies, love to jump on a call or a Zoom.
Sounds good. Dave, thank you so much. As always, you're always very generous with your time, and I always appreciate you taking time to join me. And I hope we can do it again in the future.
Love to. Thanks, Ali.
Let's do it. And I'm back on Thursday, April 3rd. It's time for Around the News. Becky Coles will be joining me for that.
Thank you so much for listening and or watching Broadcast Map. To learn more about the show, please visit broadcastmap.ca. While you're there, subscribe to the newsletter so you never miss an update. Besides, it's free. Enter your email address and hit subscribe right on the homepage and at the bottom of all Broadcast Map posts.
Oh, we nailed it, Dave. We really nailed it.